Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something I think a lot of us feel but maybe don't talk about. It's this hidden struggle for, high achieving, dedicated people, leaders in business, in nonprofits, churches, you name it. We're wrestling with this really hard reality that your personal capacity,
Right.
it's finite, but the mission, the demand, that feels exponential.
That tension is, that's the whole problem, isn't it? Our mission today is really to pull apart this idea of success and redefine it.
Mm.
We're trying to move away from this really exhausting path of leadership by addition, where you just do more yourself and shift toward the power of leading by multiplication.
Which is all about achieving success by developing other people.
Exactly. By releasing others to do the work.
And the sources we've been digging into, they make it so clear that this isn't just a theory, it's urgent. They describe this kind of quiet epidemic. You see leaders who are, and I'm quoting here, faithful but fatigued, dedicated but dangerously close to depletion.
Hmm. And the root issue is almost never about skill or, passion. It's a flawed operating system. It's the definition of success that's broken.
Yeah, a flawed system. Where does that come from?
Well, our whole modern world is kind of obsessed with the idea of the individual hero, right? We're just culturally programmed to believe achievement is the goal, that our productivity defines who we are. And when you buy into that, the only path forward feels like this exhausting cycle of addition. You just add more tasks, more pressure, more responsibility, all onto your own plate.
It's total self-sabotage, really. You get these intense short-term wins, you feel productive, but the sources are so quick to point out that it just leads to long-term weakness.
Yeah. You get a lot of movement, a lot of activity, but you never build that true sustained momentum in the organization.
Because you become the single point of failure.
You are the gravitational center of everything. And that's where the tragedy really hits home. The reports state it so clearly that in addition-based leadership, the impact never compounds. Think about that. You just become busy, but you never become multiplied. You, the leader, are literally building a ceiling on your own growth with your own workload.
Wow. Okay, so let's unpack that then. If addition is the problem, multiplication is the design. The sources really force this disruptive question. What if the greatest limitation to your leadership is not your capacity, but your definition of success?
That's the pivot right there.
Yeah.
Leadership was, it was never meant to be a solo sport. The whole design was for it to multiply. And that multiplication happens through people, not just through more effort or better tech. The entire measure of success has to change.
So instead of counting how many things you get done,
Right.
the real metric becomes who am I developing, who am I discipling and releasing?
And what's so fascinating is that this isn't some new age management idea. It's foundational. You go back to the book of Genesis, and the first command to humanity is to be fruitful and multiply. That wasn't just about biology. It was a principle for, generational continuity, for influence to carry forward.
It sets up this pattern we see throughout history, this sort of relay race of influence.
A relay race is the perfect way to put it. God's purposes seem to advance not by overloading one giant leader, but by raising up many who can carry that baton further.
Like Moses.
Absolutely. Think about Moses, a monumental leader, right? He leads Israel out of bondage, but he couldn't lead them in. His part of the mission had an end, so God raises up Joshua to carry it further. You could even argue that Moses' greatest achievement was the leader he developed in Joshua.
So his success wasn't just in finishing his race well, but in making sure someone was ready to run the next lap.
Yes. Or look at Elijah. Here's a guy who confronts kings, calls down fire from heaven, a total hero. But he needed Elisha. He needed a successor to complete the revival he began.
And you can see this in the secular world too, right? It's not just a religious concept.
Not at all.
I'm thinking of someone like Lou Gerstner at IBM in the 90s. His success wasn't just that he saved the company from collapse. It was that he raised up a whole generation of new leaders. The impact wasn't the projects he ran. It was the people who could run IBM after he left. That's multiplication.
That is the perfect modern example. It's the difference between doing the work yourself and building a culture where the work just continues. And of course, the clearest blueprint for this is Jesus.
Right, the sources really hone in on this. He chose multiplication over his own visibility. He could have handled all the crowds himself. He was healing and teaching thousands. But he spent most of his time intentionally investing in just 12 ordinary guys.
Why? Because he wasn't building an organization. He was building people. He knew the mission was way too big for just one person, even him. And the Apostle Paul, he follows that same playbook. His legacy isn't just his letters, it's the network of leaders he equipped, people like Timothy, Titus, Priscilla, and Aquila. He created a reproducible system.
The message is just, it's unmistakable. Multiplication is the logic for anything that's meant to last.
So that brings us to the hard question. If this logic is so clear, why do so many smart, competent leaders get trapped in addition? What is it about addition that fails us every single time?
Well, it seems to come down to two things: capacity and control. Addition-based leadership is built on your personal capacity, which, as we said, is finite. It just leads straight to burnout. But the other thing is it makes the leader indispensable. And honestly, we sometimes mistake that for being important.
That's a huge distinction. We're taught that if you're the only one who can do it, you must be valuable. But in an organization, being indispensable just means you're the bottleneck. Addition creates followers, not leaders. And followers contribute, sure, but leaders multiply.
Okay, but let me push back a little there. Wait a second. Isn't it just a most responsible leadership to keep control over the most important stuff? Where do the sources draw the line between, healthy oversight and just a controlling fear?
That is a fair and a really necessary question. The sources are pretty clear. Healthy oversight focuses on results and values. But a controlling fear focuses on methods, on tasks. When you lead by addition, you're clinging to the method because you think no one can do it as well as you. And that fear just stifles everyone else. There's a stark warning in there. When one person leads everything, no one else learns to lead anything.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a tough mirror to look into. So the shift to multiplication, it requires a pretty radical change on the inside. How do we spell out that core difference?
It's a shift in focus from your own performance to the system. So addition says, I'll find a way to do this faster or better. Multiplication says, I will find and raise up others who can also do this, and then let them do even more than I could.
That one distinction changes everything. Addition builds people who are dependent, who wait for your next instruction.
Yeah.
Multiplication builds disciples who take initiative.
Exactly. And, while addition might magnify the leader's personal talent, multiplication magnifies the mission's reach. And that's the real outcome, right? It makes the mission resilient, unstoppable, because it's no longer tied to one person's energy levels.
Okay, let's zoom in on the model Jesus used then. The sources call it apprenticeship, not heroism. It wasn't about him performing for everyone. It was about deliberately forming these 12 people.
He was completely focused on building people who could reproduce his work and carry the culture forward. And people become leaders when they're developed, empowered, corrected. And this is key when they are sent out. The sources really distill this into 3 essential qualities.
The first one is intentionality. He chose them deliberately. He didn't just wait around for volunteers to show up. So for a modern company, that means you have to be super proactive about identifying talent. It's not passive.
Not at all. The second quality is relational proximity. He lived with them. He taught them through real-life experience, not just lectures from a distance. This is the opposite of handing someone a training manual and wishing them luck. The source material says it's slow enough to be relational and powerful enough to be transformational. You can't just schedule mentorship into a quarterly review.
Yeah, it's the difference between telling someone what to do and letting them watch you make a really tough call in real time and then talking about it right after.
Exactly, modeling that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the third one, which is probably the hardest for most leaders today. It's empowerment. He gave them real authority to act long before they felt ready. He actually trusted them with the mission.
This is where most of us just slam on the brakes. Giving away real authority means you have to give up control. It means you have to allow for the possibility of failure and accept that things might be inefficient for a little while. How does giving authority before they feel ready even work in a business?
It means you delegate something that actually matters, not just the busy work. Maybe you give an emerging leader the whole budget for a key project. They'll probably stumble on a few things, but that's part of it. It's letting them run the high-stakes meeting where you would normally take the lead. You shift from being the decision maker to being the coach in the room.
And that risk is necessary because that's where the real learning happens,
Right.
in the failure. If you wait until they feel 100% confident, you've waited way too long.
Way too long. And that's precisely why this approach matters so much for the legacy of any mission. It protects it. When leadership is all in one person, the mission is so fragile. But when it's distributed, when it's multiplied across a team of empowered people, the mission becomes resilient.
And it unlocks the potential of the whole team. It activates all these gifts that were just lying dormant.
And that's what creates generational impact. It turns a temporary influence, a spark, into an enduring transformation, a wildfire.
That analogy of the spark versus the wildfire really sticks with you. A spark is the project you do alone. It needs your constant energy. A wildfire is the culture change that spreads on its own because you equipped other people to carry the flame.
That's the legacy. Now, let's look at the practical blueprint for this. Paul gives Timothy the clearest possible instruction in 2 Timothy 2:2.
Right. He tells Timothy to entrust the gospel to faithful people who will be able to teach others also. It's a chain. You've got Paul to Timothy, to faithful people who then teach others. That's 4 generations of development.
That model shows you the incredible ROI of multiplication. Your one investment in Timothy gets multiplied to people you will never even meet. But if you skip a link, if Timothy doesn't develop those faithful people, the whole chain just snaps.
Okay, so if the blueprint is that clear, why is it so hard? Why do we still fail to multiply?
The challenges fall into a few categories. First, you've got the internal barriers. And these are almost always about fear. Fear of being replaced, the worry that if someone else can do my job, maybe I'm not that important. Or just the fear of losing control. What if they fail? Or worse, what if they succeed too much and show me up?
That fear of their success is so tricky. Because if your apprentice becomes better than you, which is kind of the goal, it can really threaten your ego.
It does. Then you have the external barriers, mostly cultural pressure. We all feel this pressure to be busy all the time. And when you're overwhelmed, it's just easier to default to what you're good at. You say, I'll just do it myself. Because training someone takes time you feel you don't have.
Oh, I've done that 100 times. You look at a task and it's like, this will take me 20 minutes or it'll take 2 hours to train someone. So you pick the 20 minutes, you optimize for today, but you totally cripple tomorrow.
That is the addiction to addition. And finally, there's the systemic barrier. Most organizations just don't have intentional structures for this. They just sort of hope leaders will rise naturally. They completely ignore the deliberate, hands-on formation that we see modeled so clearly.
So every leader listening right now, they're at this crossroads, whether they know it or not.
Absolutely. You can keep carrying it all alone. That path feels like it gives you control, but it just leads to burnout and a fragile mission. Or you can start the really hard, sacrificial work of cultivating others. It's slower at first, but it's what leads to a legacy.
And what we're learning here, what all these sources are screaming at us, is that the greatest gift you can give is not the work you do, but the leaders you develop.
The whole shift is from being the hero who performs everything to being the mentor who equips everyone. And when your definition of success shifts to multiplying your influence through other people, the ceiling on your own capacity it vanishes.
That realization alone changes everything, and it leaves us with a pretty challenging question to sit with.
It does. If leading by multiplication ultimately frees you up and increases your impact, you have to ask yourself why you resist it. What specific responsibility are you clinging to today, right now? What are you holding on to out of fear or a need for control that you're actually being called to release to an emerging leader? That decision right there, that's the choice between addition and legacy.